Welcome to the Science of Parenting podcast, where we connect you with research based information that fits your family. We'll talk about the realities of being a parent and how research can help guide our parenting decisions. I'm Mackenzie Johnson, parent of two littles with their own quirks, and I'm a parenting educator.
And I'm Suzanne Bartholomew. I'm an associate professor who strives to help people increase their financial security. And I'm the parent of a high schooler who's a pretty good spender and saver, actually.
I'll say spender and saver, huh?
Yeah, she likes to spend my money and save her money.
Oh, that's good thinking. That's resourceful, is what that is. She's
Yeah.
resourceful. Oh, well, today we get to start digging into these episodes on talking with kids about money of when at different ages. So, I finally feel like I will have something to contribute here. Hello, my name's Mackenzie. Sometimes I know stuff, just not very much this season about money.
Back in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, right. Back in my wheelhouse. So, we're going to be talking about some of these developmental stages and how that plays out with how kids learn to understand money. And so, in this episode, we're talking about how we talk about money, how we teach financial skills and knowledge and things like that. But we're going to basically lump together all of childhood. Like everything before teen years is in this episode. So you're going to hear us kind of separate out between preschoolers and school agers, right? So that's like 3 to 5 years old versus like 6 to 12 years old. And there's a lot of overlap. There's some differences. You'll have to keep listening for those. But in order to have all these conversations, we're going to dig into these developmental stages. But one thing I feel like we haven't said, like, okay, episode 4 here this season, and we were having a great conversation with Barb right before this, our colleague, and she was just reminding us, like, so much of the stuff that you're talking about in these episodes is just parenting skills, right? But just thinking about it in the context of money. And I was like, yeah, yeah, it is, Barb. Look at that. She's talking about like being warm in conversations about money, like having expectations of our children and helping teach them things about money, right? Like all of these skills we have, and maybe we feel more competent in. I can say for myself, I feel more competent in my parenting in other areas. And then I think about money and I'm like, I don't know. And so it's like, yes, I know these things. I know some stuff. Like, we can do this.
Oh, you so do. And the more I talk to you, the more I'm convinced like you're a role model for financial parenting. I mean, you're doing some really good, valuable lessons for your kids.
Well, thanks. So I've been in my wheelhouse all season. But we're gonna keep thinking about our parenting skills that we've been talking about for 11 seasons, but we're thinking about it with newer content, with a different context, right? Not a new
Yeah,
context,
and
a
I
different
know.
context.
Sorry to yeah, so I think in an earlier episode, I said the importance of, like, these parenting for general, skills that are transferable to all, like, other domains, and
Yes.
that's certainly true of the financial domain, that some of the things that, Barb brought up about warmth and affection and connectedness and all those important aspects of parenting, they are relevant in the financial domain.
For sure. When we teach our kids about anything, it can be helpful to have like appropriate warmth, right? That it's like coming from a loving place, and that we're also like teaching them things they need for the world, and we like have expectations of them and like hold appropriate boundaries. And
Mhm.
that applies here. Great.
Yep. Yeah, yeah.
Great. That means we have even more transferable skills than we were giving ourselves credit for.
Exactly.
So,
This isn't as big a leap as some might feel that it was when
yes.
they heard kids and money, huh?
I'm like, "Ugh, yeah?"
Yeah.
But we do have a new term, right? Which
Mhm.
love that. And so this idea of financial capability. So we've talked about financial socialization. We've talked about financial well-being, right? Financial action, right? That was in episode 2. We've talked about a lot of things, financial parenting, but this idea of capability specifically. And we're going to actually follow this term through all 3 episodes. Like this episode, the one on teens, the one on young adults. And so this idea of financial capability. Tell us
Mm.
about that,
Sh
Suzanne.
Okay. Well, the scholarship of and when it comes to any kind of science is that, clarifying terms, and so we're all as scholars talking about the same thing. And so the field started with financial literacy, and that's still used quite a bit. But
Mhm.
some would argue that now that we have this new term, financial capability, you can't confuse the two. And so financial literacy
Mm.
is a more narrow term, whereas financial
Okay.
like knowledge and skills
Okay.
versus financial capability is the capacity based on knowledge, skills, and access to manage
Mm.
resources effectively. So it's adding that access piece. So these
Mhm.
three aspects of the definition are necessary for financial success. And we've talked about access, I think, in a previous episode about
Mhm.
if you can have the skills and the knowledge, but if you don't have the access to the products, the services, the resources, then you can't
Yes.
execute, the goal or the decision that you want to.
Yeah, well, and even yeah, if we put it in a concrete example, like a loan, you might know about loans, you might know about interest, you might the process even of how to get a loan, but if there's nowhere locally you can get a loan, then that there's not much capacity, right? There's not much capability to go actually do it. So that makes
Exactly.
sense. So capability adds the like knowledge skills, but it adds access. Like
It
that's part
does.
of it.
Yeah, yeah, and so for parents that are listening, when we talk about financial capability, just I want you to think about a couple of concepts as we go through the
Mhm.
different building blocks that we're going to talk about in a minute. So,
Yes.
numbers is a foundational concept of financial capability. So, children understanding more or less, right?
Mhm.
Time is another concept. So, the a concept of saving, investing, and then thinking about the future. Money and income, another concept of
Mm.
financial capability. So bills and coins, earning money, sources of earning money. And I mean, there's more to these, but I'm just giving you kind of a layout of
Yeah.
some of the simple concepts. Choice is another one. Choice
Mm. Yeah.
when there's limited resources, when there's scarcity, and then markets and exchange. So this idea of
Mm.
prices and that in exchange, if I give you $1, I'll get back X.
Oh,
So those are
yes.
kind of as parents, we should be thinking about, like, what are the concepts related to financial
Mhm.
capability? Those are kind of the big ones.
Yes, and so, yeah, what are we actually going to talk with our kids about? Those
Mhm,
types of things, right? Like,
mhm.
those concepts that you were just getting into, and especially when we think about, starting, we'll talk about preschoolers and school agers, like I said, but that's something that really stood out to me in some of the literature that you shared was these building blocks, these 3 that we're gonna talk about, they're really starting to build in preschool. Like, it's not too soon. There's not so much literature around, like, or at least from what I read, not that I know all of the literature, around, like, infants and toddlers, right? That it really gets a little more, like, concrete, that you can actually tap into the money skills or the financial skills or knowledge once they are kinda in that preschool age. And so I really am like, once they actually understand what numbers are, right? Like like this is one and it represents this many, and this is two and it represents this many. Right? Like if I'm holding my fingers up for that, like
Sure.
they don't really have that skill until preschool, which makes sense. That's kind of when some of these things start. But choice, even. Yeah,
Yeah.
choice is a financial concept.
Mhm.
Of course it is.
Yeah, yeah. Risk is another one, but,
Mm,
we might visit that probably, um,
yes, in a
here
later
along
one.
the way.
Yes.
So
So, okay, tell us about these 3 building blocks of financial capability. All kinds of concepts we teach and incorporate, but tell us about these 3 building blocks of financial
okay,
capability.
and these building blocks are not new. We've talked about some
Mm,
of them already in previous
mhm.
episodes, but the first one is executive function. So executive function are those behaviors supportive of financial well-being, and they're personal attributes that relate to, they're like a suite of mental operations. So it
Mm,
involves, like, self-control, planning, focus. So if we build a strong executive function in our child, if we help them develop that, then they can plan easier, they can focus their attention, remember
yes.
details, and then juggle multiple tasks. So
Mm,
and that will hopefully lead to healthier, or should lead to healthier,
yeah,
financial outcomes.
yes. Okay, so and as I think about these 3 building blocks of financial capability and executive function, I I'm like, okay, like creating a budget, that would be executive function, right? That planning, but
Mhm.
also the, like living within the budget you actually set, right? Like if we carry it out, that's an executive function, that ability to like control impulse and which I shared before. This is an area I maybe have for growth. I'm not going to self depreciate so much that I'm like, "Ugh, I'm doing bad." No. This is an area where I could maybe do some growth and um and it's a thing that I have like I have some of. Right? I have some executive function and I have some areas for growth. As will many of our kids.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Many
I
of
think
our
you're
kids.
underselling your skills again, Mackenzie.
Dang
I
it.
know
I was
I
trying so
know.
hard to I was trying for positive self-talk.
I know that you keep lists. I know that you're organized.
That's
That
true.
means you're a planner. I
That's
know that
true.
you can focus your attention. Keep an eye out for detail,
Ugh,
and
okay.
juggle multiple tasks as a parent.
That's true. I do
So,
that. I
yeah,
do that.
yeah.
Okay. Executive
So,
function is
executive
one.
function is one, and then financial habits and norms. So these are values, and we talked about values,
Mhm.
standards, routine practices around money.
Mhm.
So these are the habits and norms help people just kind of get through their day-to-day financial lives. Okay. So
Yes.
like norms of saving, paying bills, earning
Mhm.
income, these are all kind of the basis of a habit.
Yes. Well,
And
and that
these can
makes
be
sense,
developed.
right? The
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say a habit's basically things you do regularly, but the habit has the beauty of like it hopefully doesn't require a lot of thought, right? That's the thing about a habit. You just kind of do it. Um, but so thinking about that for our kids and money in the future, like yes, we pay bills on time. We purchase the things that we need for our family. We those kinds of things of okay, they understand you have financial habits and norms that are like you understand them and hopefully
Yeah.
they're positive habits.
Right, so child might see, okay, when the mail comes in and it's a bill, if you do get paper bills still, you do
Mhm.
get some for, like, the utilities possibly or,
Mhm.
who knows, waste management, I just got one. And
Mm.
so do you take that bill and you throw it in a pile? Like, that's a habit, right? Versus I
Yes.
open it up immediately and I, sit down at the computer and I make an electronic payment or I sit down and write a
Mhm.
check, whatever form you use. But that's a habit. Right,
Mhm.
and the norm is that we're gonna pay that on time.
Mhm. Okay, I have a thought, but I wanna hold it. I'm gonna hold this in my head until you talk about the 3rd building block.
Okay,
So, this 3rd one, financial knowledge and decision-making skills.
sure. So these are, these skills and knowledge are exhibited by actions like financial planning,
Mhm.
research. We talked about research and being able to find reliable information, use it, process
Yes.
it, and then intentional decisions, okay? And
Mm.
so, um yeah, these are again, if our know-how is really more important
Mm.
than that factual based
Mhm.
knowledge, it's the know-how, the
Yes, that
skills.
process.
And with the decision-making skills, I think we had in a previous conversation that we did talk about procrastination, choice
Mhm.
overload, and how we struggle as adults. And so parents who are listening, keep in mind that our youngsters that we're teaching, their decision making, they have no practice making decisions. So we
Mm.
need patience, we need to give them time. Yeah,
That's
and
hard.
realize that they're gonna be deciding at different rates than we are.
Yeah, we have a lot of practice of, like, whether I should buy this or that. I can make that choice pretty quickly because I make that choice all the time. A child who
Right.
is spending their allowance or who is using money they got for a gift, that they don't have a lot of experience making those kinds of decisions.
And yeah, and it's a tougher
Mm.
choice because they have they don't see
Ooh.
necessarily that there's more income coming in or more earnings
Mhm.
coming in. Maybe was a one-time job babysitting for somebody or
Yes.
mowing a lawn and they were just filling in for somebody, let's put it that way. And so
Mhm.
where we ideally, we know that there's another paycheck if
Mhm.
we're fortunate to have a steady job.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so these 3 building blocks of financial capability include our executive functioning, right? These like cognitive skills in our brain, financial habits and norms that we have those. Hopefully, they're positive, and then our knowledge, our know-how, decision-making skills. Okay, so the thing that just was like clicking, I was like, "Oh my gosh, aha, aha!" in my brain, as we were walking through this. So obviously, parenting, education, I care a lot about parents and helping them learning the things they want to know and trustworthy information. And sometimes people say things to me when they know that parenting is like my research interest of like, parenting's been going on forever. Honestly, what like nothing really changes, right? From generation to generation. And I tend to believe very differently than that. I think there are a lot of things that change in society and culture. And I think there's a lot of things. And very specific to this topic, you talking about paperless bills. I'm like,
Mhm.
that is a huge change as we think about financial parenting. I can picture my mom sitting down with bills and her 79-cent notebook, right? Like I can picture those processes as things I could observe when
Sure.
I was a kid that my kids will not observe us doing because we don't do paper bills. We
So
pay our
that's a
bills
double whammy,
electronically. Yes. But I
right?
didn't think about like how that small change is changes how we parent, right? That even the implicit, right? The modeling that happens, our kids won't see that unless we go out of our way to make sure they see that. Um
Yeah.
and I just never yeah, I believe there's a lot of things that change from parenting generation to generation, but that one thinking about it in the context of like financial parenting, that is different. There's a different set of opportunities and challenges when you're parenting our kids in like this day and age when to teach them about this stuff. That's
Yeah,
different.
the modeling isn't happening weekly or monthly because you
Mhm.
set up your bill pay once, and then
Yes.
you might monitor it on your laptop, and kids are not engaged as part of that
Mhm.
process. So you're
Mhm.
absolutely right. That's when I say double whammy. It's like, well, we
Yes.
are modeling if we're implicit financial parents, then
Mhm.
we hope they're picking up on it. But if it's not actually visible, then
Yes. That
then they're
visibility piece
the
of it.
visibility. Yeah,
Yeah. The
yeah.
visibility of it of like this is a physical thing that comes in the mail that I have to open, that I might set on the counter that my kids will see me, right? Like opening, talking about it, or like prompting a conversation between me and my co-parent or my partner about this bill and how it might be more than I expected or that happens.
Right.
That like that process looks different in a less like in a more paperless world.
Well,
Um
yeah, even the
mm,
discussions between partners. I mean, I know, like, we
yes.
have text alerts that come
Oh.
in on credit card charges,
Mhm.
which my husband gets, my daughter gets it too because she has a card
Mm.
on it, and,
Mhm.
if there's a foul charge or, like, a question about a charge, I get a text, from my husband like, "Hey, did you mean to were you supposed to get charged twice?" And so my
Yes.
daughter doesn't see that text to me.
Mhm.
Right? So again, that
Yes.
conversation is absent
Less
where it might have
visible.
been there before. So yeah,
Yeah.
that I like that you're
Oh,
picking up on that,
I'm like, my brain, my mind is
yeah, no,
blown.
that was a good one
Oh,
to pick up
yeah.
on, yeah, to point out.
Okay, so anyway, I was like, yeah, we're talking about financial capability, but as we think about this is the whole point of this episode, well, kind of this season. Like, how do we teach our kids about money? How do we talk about it? And it's like, okay, it might look different for us than it looked for our parents because of some of these technology pieces and culture, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
let's dig into this idea of right where we love talking about development. And don't forget, we have a whole podcast season 5, where we have an episode for each age group. So we actually have a separate episode, one for school agers, one for preschoolers. That you can go back and listen to those to learn all about where your child's at developmentally, kind of across the domains. But for today, thinking about money and finances, let's talk about the milestones. Where are kids at? And so let's start with these preschoolers. We defining it for our purposes today by 3 to 5 year olds. What are some of the financial milestones, like the learning and cognition? Like what's happening with
Yeah.
preschoolers and money?
W Well, they're not gonna be developing really sophisticated
Mm,
knowledge at this age,
mhm.
that they're continually developing and they're building on what they learn as they develop, right?
Yes.
Which we know, so it's continual, but in terms of finances, just learning the concept of money is a big
Mhm.
one, right? So, really, like, being able to delay gratification.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, maybe not so much developing,
Mhm.
but it's maybe starting to emerge. That's really more,
Okay.
starting a little bit later, but, consequences, being able to, demonstrate self-regulation and persistence, that's something that you
Oh,
can see in
yeah.
3 to 5-year-olds, right? A little bit like
Mhm.
the whole marshmallow experiment that where
Right, if
they
we
yeah.
give them 1, can they wait? Like, "I'll give you 2 marshmallows if you don't eat this, but then I'm gonna leave you unattended. See if
Yeah.
you eat it." Mhm.
Exactly, exactly. So I think that's a good example of like, oh god, could they resist the temptation and then the
Mhm.
consequences, right? That they get a second or third marshmallow, right? If they
Oh,
can
yes.
or the second marshmallow rather.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's the idea of like kids like having possession, so things that are mine,
Oh,
right? So
yes.
in preschools we're I think setting up routines and um strategies for kids to share, right? So
Mhm.
the idea
Yeah.
of sharing, borrowing, like if you borrow something, you have to return
Mm.
it. So, right, if you borrow a toy from the shelf, you have to return it. You borrow a book,
Mhm.
you need to return it. Yeah. So
So yeah, just like a very simplified version of, as adults, what we know as complex or what feels like complex terms, they're getting the really simplified version of that
yeah,
in preschool.
yeah. So
Mhm.
counting, right?
Yeah.
Being able to recognize what a penny is.
Mm.
So
That came up in my house this weekend. My daughter shared coins, like she got change when she purchased something. She gave my son, it was 9 cents. That was a big deal. It was 9 cents. Um, and he was upset because he only wanted the brown ones. But
oh.
that right, that ability to compare and contrast is a preschool age skill. Like he knew these are different. I like these ones better. He hadn't associated the monetary value with it, right? But like the brown ones, I want the brown ones for me. And so that there's these really simple versions of skills that come into play in preschool.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, great example. So as
Mhm.
he develops a little bit, he's gonna realize that a penny's worth 1 and then a nickel's worth 5, right? And then maybe understand the equivalence between them, that
Mhm.
if I have
Write
5 of
that
these
up.
brown ones, they equal the
Mhm.
silver one.
Yeah, the big one.
The big
We want
one.
the big
Not
one.
the really big one, but yeah, the sort of big one.
Yes. Well, and yeah, I just feel like so many of those, like the little cognitive things are just building this foundation, right? Like
Mhm,
we need to be
mhm.
able to count to understand investing, right? You need to be able to understand like just those really simple compare and contrast for comparison shopping, right? Like a lot of these adult skills that we hope our kids get to be financially capable, that foundation being laid. But it was also interesting. There's this chart from this report on the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, my new favorite, that they, in this chart, they had laid it out by age and across these three building blocks. And so they, in their chart, they had like a big green check mark on preschoolers and executive function. Like, this is the main area your children will do growth in this like stage. And so it's
Mhm.
like, okay, that's good to know. I can lean into teaching about executive function like you were talking about,
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
satisfaction and stuff like that.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll post that as a resource for parents since we're really lumping
Mhm.
the 2, age groups together so that they can kinda get a
Yeah,
deeper dive
check those
into
out.
yeah, into those, but yeah, so middle
Okay,
schoolers.
so lots of good stuff around preschoolers. What about our school agers? So, like, we're calling this like our 6 to 12-year-olds here. Tell us about
Yeah?
those kiddos and their money milestones.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you about money milestones, but before I leave preschoolers, and this
Oh,
applies to
yes.
both age groups, and we talked about this,
Okay.
is this idea of that they're exerting their independence. And
Mm,
so money represents some control that they have over their lives, and that's kind of what
yes.
kids are looking for, right? They wanna be able to make
Mhm,
their own decisions, they don't wanna be told what to do all the time over
mhm.
everything from what time to go to bed to how I spend my money or yeah, right? So this idea of autonomy and control is something I think that's worth mentioning for to
Oh,
parents about
yes.
both age groups.
Yes, and what independence or autonomy looks like for a preschooler might be like, "I have money," right? Like, "This is mine," right? We were talking about that's a concept for a preschooler, like, "This belongs to me," and what independence might look like in the age group we're moving into might look more, like, "This is mine, I can choose what to do with it," right? Like, the power it can give me to do things. So,
Yeah,
great point about
sorry
autonomy.
to derail us, but yeah, I wanted to mention that
You're
before I
right.
forgot about it. So
Mhm.
so
It's a
middle
good
school
segue.
years middle school years where preschoolers maybe aren't forming financial habits and norms, preschool I mean, childhood, they can
Mhm,
start, getting positive money attitudes, like understanding the value of saving, planning, what happens, like, for consequences, the way they spend so making a spending plan,
mhm.
um, so you can talk with them about why, when, how people spend money. This idea of being able to see a little bit into the future,
Oh,
is emerging,
yes.
right? And goal setting. So,
Mm.
yeah, those are some basic concepts of, like, understanding spending, planning,
Mhm.
saving,
Well, and I
and then yeah.
remember, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say,
Uh,
and math skills are always
oh,
all financial decisions involve risk and math skills, numeracy.
yes, math is a huge part of it. Well,
Yeah,
even, like, for school agers, right? That's like addition, subtraction, multiplication, all of that stuff at, like, elementary school. So that's a huge part of it.
yeah.
I think back to when we did our podcast episode on school agers, the word that just, like, sticks in my brain for this age group is mastery,
Yeah.
right? Like, in preschoolers, you're kind of a preschooler's learning how the world works, right? There's a lot of why. There's a lot of like, um, questions, really. But in school agers, they've kind of moved into now I understand how the world works. Now I want to try it out. Like now I want to get good at stuff. Now I want to, right? And so this idea of mastery of like I'm trying something to accomplish it or to make progress. And that's kind of what I hear in some of these skills too is like building habits, getting to use money for like things that I want, and things like that. That idea of mastery feels like it ties in.
Oh, it does, yeah, I think so,
Mhm.
that's a really good point, and, if we can encourage that through, maybe an allowance, maybe
Mm.
encouraging, they if they get the offer to make a little extra money in the neighborhood, that we let them do that.
Mhm.
This might be that would be an opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, and so the green, right, of the 3 building blocks of financial capability,
Yeah.
uh, in preschoolers, it was executive function that they were like, that's their big green check mark. But in school age, it's really this idea of financial habits and norms. And I even think of my nephew, like as a kid, I swear that kid had more money than I did, like, when he was a child because he was a saver, right? Like, and I started to see his habits and norms of that's who he's gonna be with money, right? He has kind of his personality and attitude related to money came out in this school age, and I think my daughter is learning about money, excited about money, interested in it, and she's in this school age, like, early school age group, and I'm like, I'm starting to see her habits, like, the things she likes and some of her norms. So that's really building and getting established here, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It sure
Mhm.
is. So, yeah, their attitudes are being formed and their ability to plan and spend, and
Mhm.
so,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
But then there's a whole set of, concepts that are related to
Yes.
yeah, that are related to the habits and the norms. So, like, that financial knowledge is, like, just understanding the basic concepts of, like, my parents work for money. They earn
Mm.
money.
Mhm.
And with preschoolers and I think middle childhood, you can discuss the concepts of needs and wants.
Mhm.
Goal setting is a big area, right?
Yeah.
So those short and long-term goals, at least for the middle childhood years, are things that you can work on with your child as well. So they
Oh,
can
yeah.
save for goals, that habit, right? Saving
Mhm.
for goals. So they're really financial habits and norms are related to the skills and the knowledge that we have.
Mhm. And I think that it's nice to hear you highlight these concepts of like, yes, these are the types of things I like can be talking about, right? These are the topics. If I'm thinking about talking with my kid about money for a school ager, those are some of the topics to touch on. That's really great.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
and
really
goods and
great.
services, that whole idea of exchange. I give money
Mhm.
at the store, my credit card, my Apple Wallet, whatever I'm using,
Yes.
maybe highlight that this is a form of currency. I
Mhm.
do have to pay for this later.
Yes.
You may not see dollars and cents like what you get for
Mhm.
a holiday gift, although kids are getting, like, Amazon gift cards and other
Yeah, that's true.
other plastic, which is a much more abstract concept than
Mhm.
the bills and the coins. Again,
Mhm.
that generational change. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, interesting. And that prompts me to think about I recently had a conversation about like banks basically with my school ager of we were riding in the car, had a question about how he it's because I forgot my money. I forgot to bring I went to the grocery store with my child and forgot to bring a form of payment. And so then I was talking with my
Learning
daughter. We had to
moment.
like yep, we had to leave our food behind and I had to come back, right? They like took my cart over to the side and so I had to run home and get my card and then come back and she was in the car with me and she was asking about it. She goes, "Well, you don't even give them money anyway." Like because she was like you usually
Oh.
just like she didn't understand, right, that I was putting a card in and that was my form of payment. And so we talked about like basically the store tells them that Mackenzie bought this much. Mackenzie said this many dollars. She chose stuff for this many dollars. And then the store tells my bank to take that money from the money I gave the bank. And then the store has it. Right. But I was like, this is very abstract to tell a 6 year old.
Yeah, but they can start to grasp the concept, I think,
Right? And
Yeah.
it's so important when I mean, for our family, we're like a pretty cashless family. And so it's important again, if it's not visible, like that, I feel like that is my whole takeaway from this episode is finding ways to make it visible to my kids. Uh,
Yeah.
that's like what I'm gonna keep thinking about.
Well, you might have to get a cash withdrawal from your bank account. And
Yeah, I need to
maybe,
get
like,
into a practice.
have a week or, just have a week of "Hey, we're gonna being a cash family this week," so they can learn
Mhm.
some concepts.
Yes, making it visible. I love that. So
Yeah.
we have a lot of, I mean, we've talked about so much good stuff here already. What kids are learning and working on in these age groups, but we want to dig into some strategy, right? One of which we've talked about every week, which is modeling, right? Whether we mean to or not, that's a form of educating our kids, particularly our preschoolers and our school agers who are soaking up everything. But there's also an idea of experiential learning, which is about creating experiences. And then a third version of teaching being instruction. Like we're explicitly teaching you something. So I'll touch on modeling and then I'm going to pass the baton to you to teach us a little about experiential learning. So, modeling, of course, thinking about the choices we make, the behaviors our kids observe, whether that is paying bills. If it's visible, if it's visible, choosing our clothing, right? The clothing that our family has, how we go about making that choice. Do we comparison shop? All of those things that our kids are observing about us. And as Barb reminded us, which I don't know why, I am always like, oh, Barb, good reminder. Whenever she says this, I'm like, oh, of course I need to think of that. We're their first teachers. As parents, we're their first teachers. And she said it this way, and I loved this phrase. I actually have it word for word. Home is the first place that kids see how money is valued, saved, or spent over time. Of course it
That's
is.
powerful, isn't it?
Right? Like our home is the first place that kids are going to get this. And so finding those ways we are modeling and giving attention to it. So that's one of the strategies related to financial capability. But there are these two, right? Where like, how do you talk and teach about it?
Mhm.
Here are two. One is this idea of experiential learning, right?
Yeah, yeah. So for preschoolers, they learn by doing, right? And they,
Mm-hmm.
they learn from your tone, the words you use, maybe your facial expressions about how you
Mm-hmm.
might feel, like if you're interacting with money, right? So
Yes.
you're giving them a lesson just that way.
Mm,
Um, but as we get as we get older, with school age kids, we can be more well, we can be more purposeful in our discussions. Not that you can't be
yes.
with preschoolers, but there might be a greater depth of understanding. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So with experiential learning, God, there's so many opportunities in our
Yeah.
home, with preschoolers. And I say this to how many parents have a grocery store set up either in their basement or in the garage or
Oh,
in
like a
in
dramatic play, pretend play kind of setup that their kids are
yeah,
playing restaurant or store or absolutely, especially for those
exactly.
preschoolers.
They love that, don't they? So they wait on
Mhm.
tables and then they bring you food and then they give you a check and then you give them some form of payment, like especially with
Even if it's
restaurant.
the fake slice of cheese is the payment.
That block of wood that represents a piece of cheesecake or something that you're like, "Ah,
Yes.
okay." Yeah, so that those
Mm.
types of opportunities, and this is for the middle years, I mean, both of them really,
Mhm.
um, in terms of just engaging in if you go on a shopping trip together, maybe, give them a small amount of money, have them make a choice about,
Yes.
something to buy at the store,
Mhm.
and they can hand it to the cashier. They get the
Yes.
choice, then you can reflect on the choice. Were you happy with your choice? Would you do it differently? Were you happy? Were you unhappy? Um,
Yes.
but the idea of just giving them money whenever they ask for it or want something, and that's something I know parents are probably can really relate to is that nagging for like it's almost sometimes you want to just leave your child at home rather than go shopping with
Yes.
them because it's like I'm going to spend so much more money if I take them with me because they're
Mm.
going to nag me for
Mhm.
this stuff that the marketers want them to buy. And so that's, one thing that you do have to kind of have a ready response for, like, this is our list, this is what we shop from, and we don't
Yes.
we don't deviate from the list. And I think that's an example that you've used before,
Mhm.
Mackenzie. And yeah, that maybe sharing now experiential learning, you could share like your major household budgets with your
Mm.
I would say with your school age children.
Yes.
So this is we spend our money on housing and transportation and clothing and food.
Mhm.
And you could give them M&Ms and say, we spend
Mm.
half of our M&Ms. Okay, maybe we don't use candy because of the health, the food
But
season.
something,
Some
right? Like
carrots,
something that
maybe
visually
some carrots.
represents.
Yeah, yeah, and then they divide it up, and you're like, "Wow, all of our carrots go towards how that much goes towards housing
Mm.
and food." And so, that's just kind of
Yes.
like minor ways that we can bring them in.
Mhm.
But I know kindergartners and school age kids understanding wants and needs.
Yes.
I held on to the piece of the kindergarten my kindergartner's, little drawing of like, "Oh, air is a need, love is a need."
Oh.
And then she put iPod is not a is not a want, that is a want. So she got it right.
Yes. Yeah,
So
like,
I
good
think
job.
kids, they are understanding that, yeah. So,
Mhm.
and I think
Yeah.
yeah.
I would say, well, and I think of the experiential learning with like, so for preschoolers, I love the idea of pretend play. Preschoolers are so into pretend play. So they can
Oh,
try
yeah.
out those roles, they can try out those processes. Love that as an idea because it's really just experiential learning is just about creating opportunities where they can try it out. Right. And so, I mean, I even think of, so often I say like try it out with low consequence, right? And so
Mhm.
learning a hard lesson about money, you've talked before about like the school of hard knocks. That's how people learned about money. I made mistakes and then like literally paid for it. Um but that's what experiential learning is, and when we can do this with our kids, create opportunities for them to try it out and experience whatever that is while the consequences are fairly low. Okay, actually I have a story. I think I teased it. You asked me a question in a previous episode. I was like, "Wait, I don't want to tell you yet. I want to tell it later." Um, I had an experience recently with my daughter who is school age. She brought money to the store. She had $2. She wanted to buy something. Comes up to pay. It's $1.99. She rings it up and it's $2.13 because there's tax. And I had mentioned to her when she was choosing an item that, okay, it's actually the price tag is not actually how much you pay. There's tax. And so I had explained a little bit about that and she wanted to try it. And so we went up to the counter with the thing she wanted to purchase and she rang it up. And sure enough, right, it was too much. And she looked at me and she goes, "You don't have any coins you can give me?" And I was just like heartbroken inside. I was like, "I just want to fix this discomfort for you. You're so sad." But I mean, that was what my like heart said, but I was like, this is an important moment for her, right? She's learning about spending her own money. She's learning about needs and wants and
Delaying
like learning about this
gratification.
decision making, right? And like
Mhm.
this decision making process and yeah, and the knowledge of like sales tax exists. And so I literally didn't have coins. I did have my card that time to pay for my groceries, but she had to put it back. She had to choose something else because she didn't have enough money. And at first she was really disappointed about it and she ended up finding something that was cheaper and so she could get two of them instead of one bigger thing, but it was actually a really great opportunity for us. She had the experience of like the disappointment and the decision making process, but it also sparked some really great conversations around what is sales tax. We talked about how it helps pay for like schools and roads and parks. You love to go to the park? Like tax is part of what pays for that, and that we all share. Like everybody who goes to the store pays that sales tax, and that right, everybody contributes. And but that experience is really what I'm trying to get at the heart of is she got to try that out. And
You
so
had a
trying to
tax
create those
conversation.
opportunities.
I'm sorry, I had to interrupt. I mean, you're having a
Please.
tax conversation with your child, and you're saying you're not a strong financial parent. I mean,
Okay, I
by the
maybe
end of this season, we're gonna have you in a really good place in terms of
I'm
your
gonna
feelings.
I'm gonna feel so confident. I'm gonna know. But yeah,
You're
by the
there.
end of the
Yeah.
season, you'll finally convince me, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely,
Oh,
definitely.
so yeah, and it's almost like two parts to the story, right? That the experiential learning, she got to try it out. So other ways we create these opportunities is like how they use their money from the tooth fairy or a gift, like money they get for a gift, or even like having a lemonade stand. That's a
Mhm.
experiential learning with money for our childhood, like our kids in childhood. But then the second piece of like actually teaching about taxes, that was more on the explicit instruction, right? Like I'm like actively teaching you a concept or a skill. Um, and so for preschoolers, I even think of like my tip for talking with preschoolers about money, or honestly teaching preschoolers anything, like make it about their immediate concrete experience. Like what is in front of you And so one example I think of is like price tags.
Mm.
Teaching my son who's a preschooler, like, this little sign here has numbers. What number is this? Okay, that's how many dollars it costs. If we want to bring that, like, if we want to have that thing, we are saying we will pay that many dollars. But again, like trying finding ways to make it concrete to their experience. And so one of those strategies for explicitly teaching money concepts to preschoolers is books. Books
Yeah.
are a great way to make something like in their current concrete experience. So, explicit instruction for preschoolers, books, and then finding ways to make it concrete. What about some strategies for explicitly teaching our school agers?
Well, talking to them about, how income comes into your house,
Mm.
right? So, they can understand jobs and that there are different types of jobs that we can have to make money. And, just a conversation, whether it's from a book where it's like we're reading about firefighters or construction
Mm.
workers or whatever it might be. There's some books
Yes.
that have all the different types of occupations, having a
Mhm.
discussion about what they want to be. Um, and then how there's a different set of skills that are required for all the different types of jobs. So, how does income come into our house would be
Mhm.
one discussion for explicit instruction.
Yeah.
Um, Taking them to work with you or your
Ooh,
partner, if
yeah.
you're partnered, or if you have a parent that could show
Mhm.
them the workplace, and give them exposure that way, and then talk about this is how I spend my time, and I have to work this many hours. So just teaching them the idea of earning income, right?
Mhm.
And um, explicit instruction could be if you encourage them to take a job in the neighborhood, right? That they make their
Mhm.
own earnings, and so that I have the power of earning money
Yes.
and the choices over and talking to them about that and what are we going to do with
Mhm.
it? Where are we going to put it? Like in a bank, or are we going to put it in a piggy bank? So
Yes.
how we're storing money through
Mhm.
earnings that we make, in the neighborhood. So
Mm. That was twofold, right? They get the experience of, like, earning the money and having the money, so it's
mhm.
experiential learning, but it's also explicit because we're talking about the concepts that go into it, right? So
Yeah,
they
yeah.
often go hand in hand, and typically, somewhere in there is some modeling. So we get all 3 strategies there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and if they do make some earnings, having that discussion about what's a goal, what do you think is a
Mm,
reasonable goal for this money, and how do you wanna spend it, and what happens if you're not happy with what you purchase? So, all of a sudden,
yes.
teaching them some consumer skills. I think I
Mhm.
mentioned this in a previous
Oh,
episode.
yeah.
I bought something and my daughter bought something, she wasn't happy with the quality of it, or it was
Mhm.
defective. There's been a couple of occasions, and so
Mhm.
all of a sudden, now that she's older than school age,
Yes.
but it is an opportunity to talk about those consumer skills as
Mhm. Well, and
well.
even I think of, like, taking my child to the customer service desk with me.
Yeah.
Listening to how I have those conversations and talking with them. I was bringing this back because of blank, right? And hopefully modeling positive, like interpersonal communication skills there. But yeah,
Yeah,
also getting to teach those things. So,
sure, and, maybe you have them cut coupons for you, and
mm,
then you have a discussion, a very explicit,
mm-hmm.
like, "Okay, this is what we buy every week in our household. Here's a coupon for it, and I'm gonna actually instead of it being $1, it's gonna be 80 cents because of this piece of paper," or because it's not
Yes.
visible, it's on your app,
Mm,
right? On your grocery store app if
mm-hmm.
you use one, and you can show it to them.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
So,
that's awesome.
there's so many
That,
opportunities. The
yes.
the issue is that they take time, and,
Mm.
have I mentioned this, already earlier in this podcast that, parents, we wanna just get it done, and we don't wanna
Mm-hmm.
take the time for those lessons, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
blaming parents, I'm guilty of it,
No.
but
Yeah.
it'll pay off,
Mhm. It
if
is,
you do
it's
take the
more
time.
work. It is more work than just right, I can go to the store by myself and just zip around. I mean, I've literally
Mhm.
worn my headphones to the grocery store by myself, right? This, like, luxurious experience of, like, I'm all alone. No one's bothering me. I'm just getting the stuff I need, and I'm listening to, like, a podcast or music I like. That is less work than bringing my child with me and managing their behavior and teaching these concepts and giving them opportunities to, like, try stuff out or look at price tags. That takes more energy and attention, and we don't
And
always have it, and that's
yeah,
okay to not always have it. In a previous episode, like, we can show up imperfectly, right? We're gonna
yes.
show up imperfectly and still try it.
Right,
Mhm.
and it's an ongoing process.
Yes.
We're
Yes.
still learning, you're still learning, I'm still learning.
Mhm.
You know,
Or else
it's not done. It's never
Ye
done.
yes. We're always just trying it out. We're really just trying it out. Okay, so we've walked through these 3 building blocks of financial capability, and we've got lots of great strategies for our preschoolers and our, school-age kiddos, and now this brings us to another stop free talk space where our producer is gonna ask us an off-the-cuff question. I don't know what she's got for us talking all about kids today. Let's see. I know you always look a little too energized and intrigued to ask us something hard.
Do I have a tell?
Your facial expression gives me hints. I don't know.
Oh,
It
boy.
was her eyebrows, the way she raised
Yeah,
them.
very good.
Yeah, so and this is a question that Mackenzie has heard in previous seasons,
Okay.
but we're focused on this topic, right? We're talking about kids and money. So, and of course, Barb helped me come up with it too, but, if let's imagine we're at the point where our kid is, say, honestly, could be any age, but say, since we're talking to
Mhm.
to middle childhood, say they're like a 4th or 5th grader,
'Kay.
and we realize we have not talked about money. Like, we go to the
Mm.
store, I just we buy things, I swipe my
Mhm.
card like you were talking about. When they have activities, I just go ahead and, you know, write a check or send the money with them, but, like, don't really talk about it. Um, and I've hit this point where I've listened to this podcast and go, "Wait a minute. I haven't done any of that." So the question is, um, if we don't model those things or we haven't talked about what we're doing with our money, how can we, and Mackenzie, you're gonna know the word I'm gonna use, how can we recover? How can we
Mm.
catch up? Is it too late to have those conversations? But, like, where if we're talking to our, say, 4th or 5th grader, how can we recover?
Mm. I have an answer, but I
Mhm.
don't have to go first.
Well, I mean, I would dare say that you think that you haven't taught them anything, right? You're saying, the assumption is what you're coming with this question is like, I'm at the stage, my child's in 4th or 5th grade, and we haven't had any discussions. Well, I would argue that I bet I could go back through the last 10 years of your child's life and pinpoint many lessons that you gave your
Mm.
child that you were not aware of, and
Sure.
that may not have felt explicitly like financial lessons, but you really have engaged in much more than you know, and I think that Mackenzie, the other Mackenzie, has been definitely a testimonial to that, that the
That's
more we
true.
talk about it, the more there's emerging from because she's putting a magnifying glass on her behavior because of this episode
Yes.
or this season, not this episode, but because of this season, she's uncovering all sorts of financial parenting that she's doing that she's like, "Wow, okay, man, okay, I'm doing a lot more than I thought." And, so to get started, I mean, but if you want to be more explicit and purposeful, I would argue there are opportunities for that. And so
Mhm.
I mean, just some of the concepts that we've talked about that you could just start bringing your child into decisions you're making. You can have a family meeting where you start maybe talking about, hey, we have a little bit of extra we have
Mm.
$200 extra this year, or this
Mhm.
month or this quarter. What do we want to do with it as a family? And where did this money come from? Why do I have extra money? So,
Yeah.
because of
Mm.
maybe cutting out an expense or whatever it might be. So yeah, I would argue that it's definitely never too late to start. And it's
Mhm.
just, you just have to be more purposeful about it. And
Purposeful.
Mhm.
and having that conversation, um, and ask them what
Yes.
questions do they have.
Mm.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Start with like, we don't haven't really talked that much about money. You see me doing stuff. You see me online shopping. We go to the grocery store together, but we never really talk about money. Do you have any questions about, you know, anything to do with money?
Yeah.
And if I'm comfortable answering it, I will. If
Mhm.
I'm not, I'll tell you why I'm not.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Mhm.
Like, "Oh, let's find the answer."
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think that's also establishing this kind of like open communication we hope our kids have with us later,
Yeah.
related to money and related to other things. Is like, yeah, you can ask. Mhm. You can
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah.
Also, one thing I'm big on repair and recover, and
Mhm.
so I do think, yeah, saying to your, I think it's okay to have that conversation with your child of, I've I've kind of left you out of this.
Mhm.
I maybe it would have been good if I'd been teaching you more stuff, like, but let's get started. Let's explore some of this. And so I think it's okay to have that conversation and tell them, from here out, I'd like to do this more, or it's okay to just draw your attention, like, I could have done this better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that's all right to own that. And then one of the things I think of, I'm like, choose whichever of those three strategies we just talked about, of modeling or experiential learning or explicit teaching. Choose one that you feel like, maybe if you feel like you're brand new to it,
Mhm.
choose whatever feels most achievable to you. Like, okay,
Yeah.
having these conversations intimidates me, but I could help them with, like, a lemonade stand, right? Or like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
going all the way from 0 to lemonade stand feels like a big leap, but I
Mhm.
could work on making what I'm doing with money more visible to my child, right? Choose
Mhm.
whatever one you feel like you have the most natural strengths, personality for, and lean into it, right? You
Mhm.
don't have to go, right? We're showing up imperfectly. We don't have to go from 0 to, like, our child is now a financial wizard. You know? And so show up in, like, a small increment that you feel is, like,
Mhm.
achievable to you, and then build from there.
Mhm.
Is really where I'd say, like,
Yeah.
it's not too late to start.
Okay, so I'm also gonna answer my own question just briefly because I thought of something as you were
Yeah.
talking. 4th and 5th grade is about the time that you also might be starting, like, 4-H. And that would also be a great
Mm.
time to say, "Oh, we didn't talk about this, but this project requires us to talk about how much we spent on the fabric that we bought," and that's
Yes.
the consumer management side of it. So that's my shout
Mm.
out to Barb of the 4-H side of things too.
Yes. Yeah, a
And
great
yeah.
opportunity. It's almost like that's intentional.
Yeah.
That 4-H starts at this developmental stage where they're learning to do all these things. That's great.
So, alright.
Yeah, that's a good way to answer your own question, and I was gonna bring up the
Well,
same point about the interaction, like, you may feel like as a parent, "Oh, I haven't gotten started with my child," but they've gotten started, and so
Mm.
I think asking them about what they know about money, how they're interacting with money, so whether it's 4-H, Girl Scouts, Boy
yeah.
Scouts, fun school fundraisers, coming home and asking for money for a field trip,
Mhm.
what paying a library fine. I mean, we interact with the economy all the time, whether or not we have a wallet in our pocket or not,
Right.
Mhm.
and whether or not we're spending. And so that might be a good conversation opener too. Like,
Yeah.
what do you know
Mhm.
about money? Where have you learned about it? What is school teaching you? Because
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
mandate in Iowa now is that there has to be some instruction around financial literacy. And the first graduates were in 2021,
All
2022.
right.
Oh.
Yeah, so they are learning about money even if you fall down on the job as a parent.
But really you haven't. You've probably been talking about it. It's just not
Exact
Yes.
you have
yeah.
not, no.
I'll say, though, you said library fine, and I'm like, "Oh, that's that executive function piece." This is where I see an area for growth. I'm thinking right now that, we
You
probably
have
have
a
some
fine to
library
pay?
books. I can teach the
Oh.
concept of borrowing and returning
Yeah, and
and paying a
consequence
fine.
the consequence, and then it's like, well, the taxing, right? The tax for
Oh,
our library
yes.
service, but then it's like a fine. I kinda look at it like, well,
Mhm.
the
It's
library needs
consequence.
my $2, but I won't tell my child that. It's
Yes.
I that's a good
Oh.
way to spend my money, but anyway.
Mhm.
That would
Yes.
would that fall under a logical or natural probably a logical consequence of
Yeah. They have implemented a logical consequence at the library that if we don't return things in the time period we agreed to, that we have to pay a fine. That would be a
Mm,
logical consequence
yeah.
that I
Mm.
will need to, deal with
Mackenzie
in the very near future.
I was gonna say Mackenzie has a logical consequence for herself to
My logical consequence for,
yeah.
my lack of planning on the executive function to return the library book.
Oh, I
Oh,
understand.
funny. Alright, well, I will let
Awesome.
you go. Thank
Wrap
you.
things
Sounded
up here? Yeah, thank you. Good
Thanks,
question.
Kens. Yes, and I'll say, digging into this idea of financial capability today, these three building blocks, you're going to hear more about them next week. But understanding, how do we have these conversations with our kids, our preschoolers, our school agers? Suzanne gave us a great list of some of the concepts that we teach at each age. And then also understanding which of the building blocks at which stage they're really working on building. So we know for preschoolers that executive functioning is really coming in. And then for our school agers, really some of those financial habits and norms. So, but you got to come back next week to see what age group. Spoiler. I was like, because Suzanne's about to tell you. So,
Yeah.
who are we talking about next week?
In our next episode, we're going to talk about teens and money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's some unique opportunities for these teens, right?
Oh, yeah. There are. They really interfacing with the economy and with peer pressure and wanting to belong and fit in, which usually has a price tag next to it.
Oof, yes, that can
Right?
be tricky. So
Yeah.
all of that and more in next week's podcast episode. But for today, thanks for joining us on the Science of Parenting podcast. If you want to learn more about these developmental milestones and your child's ability at each age group, you can check out, like I said, that podcast season on season 5. But you can also look on our website. Our website has kind of these categories of different age groups where you can explore lots of stuff related to their development and their age. So check out our website at scienceofparenting.org. Very specific pages tailored with content for your kids.
Cool. That's a great resource, Mackenzie. And so come along with us as we tackle ups and downs, the ins and outs, and the research and reality about the science of parenting.
The Science of Parenting is hosted by Mackenzie Johnson, produced by Mackenzie DeYoung, with research and writing by Barbara Dunn Swanson. Send in questions and comments to parenting@iastate.edu and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or accommodation inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.